Welcome to Unreal Gems. In this video we are going to take a look at the Rewind Debugger, a tool that we can use to record gameplay and then watch variable values and tons of other stuff. Let's get to it. Okay, so now that presentations are out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the Rewind Debugger and what it is. It allows us to record segments of gameplay and then we can use the timeline, as we can see here, to recap, to rewind the movements and the animation variables so we can debug problems. So as we can see in the Lyra character, we are going to have a pretty complex character, and if we have any problems, they are going to be really difficult to debug if we just do it with print strings and things like that. So with the Rewind Debugger, we can go ahead and pause and scrap the timeline, as we can see here, and we are going to be able to see everything like variables, curves, blend spaces, anim blueprint, state machines, everything related to animation. We are going to be able to see it in action, see what is going on in each moment, and if we have any errors, we are going to be able to correct them really easily because we are going to be seeing everything. We can stop the animation at any point and we can take a look at everything that is going on under the hood. So this tool is really going to come in handy if we have complex characters, or even if we have simple ones. It is going to be easier to debug problems than using classical debug tools. Okay, so first up, if we want to use the Rewind Debugger, we need to first activate the Animation Insights plugin. So we are going to be seeing how we can do that right now, and then we can go to Tools, and in the Debug section we are going to see the Rewind Debugger and the Rewind Debugger details, which are going to be the tools that we are going to be using and what we see down here. This is the Rewind Debugger. The Rewind Debugger details are going to be the variables and so on and so forth. The information about every track in the Rewind Debugger is going to be displayed in the Rewind Debugger details. Alright, so let's go ahead and see how we can activate the Rewind Debugger in the engine. So we are going to first check in Edit Plugins for the Animation Insights plugin. If it's already checked, you are good to go. If not, go ahead and check it and you will have to restart your engine. Since it is already activated in mine, I don't have to do that. Next, we are going to the Tools panel and looking for Debug and Rewind Debugger. And also we are going to activate Rewind Debugger details. You can see the panel on the right and the timeline on the bottom. Now we are going to close up some menus that I already have so we can see things clearly. We are going to leave details and Rewind Debugger details. Right now we cannot see anything down in the timeline because we have not recorded any segment of gameplay. So if we don't record anything, we are not going to be able to see anything. And we also need to choose the actor to debug. Okay, so now that we know how to activate it and how to get to it, let's go ahead and talk about the interface of the Rewind Debugger. First, we have the classical project simulation controls, which are going to allow us to play, pause, and stop the game, so the playing editor. Next, we are going to have the camera modes, which is this small button. It's going to allow us to change the camera behavior from the Rewind Debugger. We can stay close to the character. We can see the same camera as the player was seeing, and we can also detach completely and see the animation from wherever we want. So next up, we have the outliner, the object outliner, which is going to allow us to see everything that has been recorded, the tracks, and then selecting them is going to make the details available in the Rewind Debugger details panel. Next, we have the play controls. So we are going to be able to pause the action, play the action, go frame by frame, go to the end, to the beginning, and record. Now in Unreal 5.7 there are more things that we will talk about in the tutorial, but these are the basic controls. And next we have the timeline with the scrap, the playhead, and all of the visual information from the tracks that have been recorded. Next up, we have the Rewind Debugger details panel, which for each track that has details, displays all of them for us. So with this, we can now jump in and take a look at how we can use Rewind Debugger to debug our characters. Alright, so let's now see how we can use the Rewind Debugger to record segments of gameplay. The first thing is going to be going to the play button and hitting play. Next, we are going to press Shift F1 to get the mouse out of the viewport. And now we can press the record button in the Rewind Debugger. We go back to our character and we play as normal. We can now jump, run, and do whatever we want so that we can next debug whatever problem we have. I am right now pretty satisfied, so I'm going to hit pause. And now you are going to see that we can choose the character with the picker or the object outliner and go to your character. I'm going to use the picker because I think it's easier. You can go ahead and click on it and then click on your character, and the animation data is going to pop up and you are going to be able to see every track that has been recorded. We have blend spaces, the anim blueprint, we have the weights, the notifies, and everything that has been recorded that our character has animation wise. You can see here, this is really important information. If you don't eject, you are not going to see the gameplay camera, but let's first take a look at the anim tracks. So if we stay on top of one of the tracks and it has data, we are going to be able to see the value. For example, here we have the blend space weights and how they change depending on what we do. So this is going to come really in handy. And then you have the curves, the data that you can also be on top and see what is going on and how everything is working together. So as you can see, this is really, really easy to use. We can go and stop exactly on the place that we want and see the values that we want. And this is going to make animation debugging really easy. Okay, so let's now eject from the character so we can control the camera and we can actually see the exact same camera from the gameplay. And as you can see, we can now rewind and see what's going on. If we change the camera with the camera control button, we can go ahead and instead of following the target actor, use other modes, like for example, disabled. Here we can freely control the camera and it's not going to be tied to the character in any way. So we can go ahead and go further and then change it and go back to the recorded camera as soon as we play. The track is going to be really close. And we are going to see the same camera as we saw in the gameplay. If we change anything in the camera, you can see that it snaps back unless we go to follow target actor, and then we can go back and it's going to follow the actor. So this will come in handy if we want to debug certain bones or certain things and we don't want the exact gameplay camera, then we use this mode. So in summary, if we want to see a certain part of the actor, we can keep the camera following the actor, then disabled for being detached from the actor, and finally to replay exactly the recorded gameplay camera, you go to recorded gameplay camera. This being said, there is a small trick that we can use to not have to click so many times. So we can go ahead and with the stop button pressed, we can also delete the recorded gameplay with the trash can icon. And now we can go ahead and activate the small trick. As you can see, there is a eject button on screen that we can press and it is going to automatically eject for us when we press the pause button. So this is going to allow us to not have to eject every time. Next, we can go ahead and press the automatically start recording when we press play in the simulation controls. So when we press play in editor, it is going to automatically start recording for us, as we can see right now. We can go ahead and do our thing, and when we are done, we are going to press Shift F1 and then hit pause, and it is going to eject for us. If I now scrap the recording, you are going to see how the camera snaps into place and I get exactly the same camera as in the gameplay. Now I have everything in place that I need for debugging. If we want to move the timeline, we can go ahead and use the mouse wheel and control to zoom in and zoom out, the mouse wheel to go up and down, and the right mouse button to go left and right. With these controls, we can now move the timeline however we want and debug exactly what we want. Additionally, we can temporarily switch cameras using the camera menu and the submenu pilot. So we can pilot other actors like we see now, switching to the actor core blueprint. Next, you can scrap and go back to the Rewind Debugger camera, and again you can switch with the pilot submenu to another type of camera, like for example detaching from the actor, as we can see right now. If we go ahead and click it, we will now be detached, and as soon as we scrap back, we will be right back. So you can see how this is really handy to be able to change cameras temporarily. On the right of the camera menu, there is a quick access button to the eject button and the exact camera view. Once we are done with the changes to correct the problems, we can go ahead and press the pause button and then play, and we will be able to test and record further to see if the problem has been fixed or not. When we record gameplay, we can access our traces using the trace menu, so we can manage the size of set traces, because over time they can start adding up. With the trace menu, we can control everything trace related, like for example how we store traces, if we want to start a trace or stop a trace, but this is general for debugging. What we want to check is the open trace store directory, which is going to take us to where our traces are stored, like for example the Rewind Debugger traces. And as you can see, we have a 200 megabyte trace and we have recorded short segments of gameplay, so you can see how it can start adding up quickly. So you need to check on this from time to time to have it under control. This also comes in handy when you need to open up old traces. You can copy the path and then go ahead and click on the folder button, and you can paste the path and access all traces that you can then open and see in the Rewind Debugger, so you can pick up where you left off in the last session. So as you can see, it is not only important to manage the size and get rid of old traces that we don't need anymore, but also for maybe sharing our traces with a colleague or someone that is helping us with our project and needs to see the animation data so he can help us fix the problem at hand. Okay, so once we have the recorded data, we can go ahead and go to the tracks in the timeline panel, and you can see that we can double click, for example, in the animation blueprint, and we are going to be able to see in real time for every frame in the timeline all the animation data, including active poses, variable values, and as you scrap the timeline and move the time, you are going to see everything update in real time. You are going to see the character in the preview viewport match the gameplay perfectly that we are seeing in the main viewport, and also the information on the anim graph. So this is perfect for debugging anim graph problems. In terms of state machines, you can also see the states update in real time and also the transitions. So this allows us to see exactly how state machines are working at each time step and see if we have any problems that need to be solved in our state machine. You can see that this comes really handy when we are debugging anim graph problems, because you can see the state machines working, the poses working, the blend weights. You can see when everything is activating, and you can see it dynamically. When the poses are getting activated, the alphas of the blends, you can see how the flow of the poses is working. So we see that we start with the locomotion state machine, then we apply the dynamics of the earrings, catch the pose. Next, we go to the main state machine, which is going to then feed the pose to the animmontage slot, and that is going to go to the output pose, which will be the final pose of the character. If we take a look at the main state machine, you are going to be able to see how the locomotion is interacting with the jumps. This is really good because you can see when it is switching to the jump loop and see how the jump loop works. You can see how it switches poses dynamically when we are jumping, starting the jump and then falling and then going back to idle. It is important to note that we don't have to scrap the time manually. We can use the play button to play the animation, and we can do it at the gameplay cadence, but we can also switch the speed of the playback, and in this example make it really slow with 0.1, press play, and you are going to see Citrine jump in slow-mo, and you are going to see the transitions perfectly. This is especially useful when you are debugging complex animations and you need slower speed to see where problems are popping up. In other videos, we learned how to use the slow-mo command, but it is way more difficult than using the Rewind Debugger because, as you can see here, we can pinpoint the place that we want to start the slow-mo from, and then we just press play. With the slow-mo command is way more difficult because you have to guess and you have to try to do it again and again. Talking about past tutorials, there is another tool that we have learned before that is called Pause Watch, which is especially powerful in combination with the Rewind Debugger. So let's go ahead and take a look at the main state machine, and we are going to look at the jump animation and the fall loop animation. And what we want to do is activate the Pause Watch in both of them so we can debug the bones and see what's what. You need to choose the right debug instance. If not, you will not see anything. Let's go ahead and go back to the jump loop animation and also toggle Pause Watch. Let's press back in the anim graph, go to the other animation, as we said, toggle Pause Watch, and please remember to do this before recording. If not, it will not pop up and it will not record it properly. As you can see, both pause watches have activated at the right time, and now we are going to press pause to stop the recording. Then we can go back and replay the animations. To reach the pause watch manager, you can go ahead and press window and then pause watch manager if you don't see it. And you can see how both pause watches can be previewed in the animation preview and toggled on and off using the pause watch manager. We can see how the jump pause pops up when it is time. Next, the fall loop pause pops up, and lastly, both of them are gone when we are back to idle. So right now, pauses disappear when you press pause and the Rewind Debugger is active. I think it is a bug and I will be reporting it. And as soon as I know anything and I know of a process to be able to see the poses in game, I will let you know. For now, we can use the animation preview because it's synced to the gameplay character, so you can go ahead and move freely on the preview anim editor and see what you need to see. Toggle the poses on and off with the pause watch manager or directly in the nodes, but for now we cannot see the poses in game. But as I mentioned before, I will let you know as soon as I know anything, and if there is a workaround, I'll let you know. When it is fixed in Unreal 5.7, please remember to toggle pause watch before recording, because if not, pause watches will not be recorded and you won't be able to use them. Right now it is weird because they are being recorded. We can see them in the track editor, but they are not showing up when you press play and when you are debugging gameplay in the main viewport. So for now, just stick with the anim preview, and if you do need to see the bones on the gameplay character, I know of a small trick that you can use to be able to see the bones and debug anything related to them in the character. In the quick access buttons toolbar on top of the viewport, press the I button with the visualization options. A menu will pop up, and go down to developer and choose bones. With that, you will be able to see an overlay with the bones while you are scrubbing the timeline with the Rewind Debugger, allowing you to debug any problems that come up with your character easily. We can now take a look at the bones in the gameplay viewport and the poses in the anim preview viewport. You can see some popping in the bones because I have a modular character and I have a skeleton for the hair, which is physically animated, and then I have another skeleton for the body. So that's why you are seeing some popping, because of both the skeletons see fighting. This is not ideal, but we can still see the pose watches on the anim preview viewport, as I mentioned before. And you can rotate it, zoom into it, and get close to the bones and then compare to the main viewport. So I see this as a small problem. If you want to get rid of the bones in the main viewport, you can go ahead and just untick them again and they will be gone from the main viewport, and we can get back to seeing just the character. Okay, so the next tool that we are going to see is that just as we double clicked the anim graph, we can also double click on any other asset and we will be able to see its details. For example, this blend space, which is the walk around blend space, we can double click and we can see everything related to it. If we go back to the anim graph, I prefer going to the node of the blend space, so we can go inside the locomotion and inside the walk run state, and then we can see everything updating in real time, and we can see the variable values, like for example the small green cross that we can see going across the blend space across the 3 states. And with that we can know exactly at each time what value the ground speed variable has, which is extremely important to know if the blend space is working well. We can also see the anim preview editor updating in real time, exactly the same as in the gameplay. We can also get closer so you can see everything better. Let's do that right now. And you can see also the playback time of the blend space. As I mentioned before, you can see the exact point in which the blend space is working, and if you press Ctrl Alt, you can see the blend weights of the different animations. This is really handy when you have complex blend spaces. You can see everything working in real time and you can scrub and see why everything is happening the way it's happening. Another element that we haven't talked about, and it's pretty interesting, is the filter button. You can go ahead and discard what you don't want if you have a really complex character. So you can say, oh, I don't want pose watches. Okay, get rid of them. I don't want blend weights, so blend spaces, let's get rid of them. And you can see how everything disappears or appears depending on if we check or uncheck the boxes. We can also filter the tracks by name and filter the track type with the upper bar. And with this, you are able to get to the tracks that you really need and forget about the rest. So lower bar track name and upper bar track type. So the track types are not that many, and maybe it is not as essential, but in terms of the track names, it comes really handy. So as a last example, we can disable the pose watches if they are bothering us with the check right next to its type. Another interesting thing that we can do with the Rewind Debugger is seeing the variable values in the anim blueprint. But for that, we need to do some extra steps. We will have to record again, but don't worry, you won't have to do it because you will already know this information, so this will not be a problem for you. Alright, so let's go to our anim blueprint and then press the right button and select Trace Object Properties. This is going to allow us to record the gameplay, recording the variable values, the anim blueprint variable values, which we are going to be able to check using the Rewind Details panel. For that, we need to go down to the Properties track. So let's click on it. And on the right, in the Rewind Debugger Details panel, we can now check the variable values. We have tons of stuff here, so you can go down and you will see the variables. So you can see is falling, the ground speed, everything that the character has. So if we go back, we can see the values changing. If now we are in the air, we are falling, so you can see there is falling variable active, and when we land, you are going to see it as soon as it hits the floor, turned off. So here you can see how this is really powerful to debug problems related to animation and the anim blueprint, because you can see the velocity, which is what is used to calculate the ground speed. So if we would have a problem with the blend space, we could see exactly the value of the ground speed variable and see why it is acting the way it is acting. Again, you can see with Control Alt the mix of animations. Remember what a blend space is. We have a smooth mix of different animations, in this case the idle, walk and run animations. Here we were seeing the idle and walk mix, and you can also go ahead and open up the blend space and you can see the speeds at which each animation is being set. So it will smoothly interpolate between the three of them: idle, walk and run. If you want to know more about blend spaces, please go ahead and check my older videos. So as you can see, we can at each moment perfectly debug what we have in our blend space, like for example with Control Alt to see the animation mix, see the ground speed variable, what values it has, and we can also see what is being activated at which point. So now we have no excuses for those imperfect blend spaces. In fact, as we mentioned before, we can see the weight of the blend space and the other animations and how they mix as we move the character, jump or perform any other action. We can see here how the influence goes down for the walk run blend space, then the jump comes in, then the fall loop, then the land, and then we go to the blend space again and then idle. Now you can see how nice is debugging everything visually. Okay, so let's now take a look at the notifies and how we can debug them with the Rewind Debugger. So let's go down to the notify tracks, and you can see the left foot and the right foot right there, and you can see the markers when they come up. Let's go ahead and change the camera mode to follow actor, and let's center ourselves in the feet. Let's now go to one of the contact points and see if the foot is contacting the floor in the right fashion. So you can see right here, if we go down to the left one now, that everything is working okay. So the right foot touched the ground at the right time and the left foot also did the same. So we can see that the notifies are working really well and they are correctly letting us know when the character is touching the ground with each foot. So if we would have footstep sounds and we had a problem, we could correct it with this tool really easily. Another option that we have is extending the Rewind Debugger functionality with our own custom plugin. We can see an example of this in the game animation sample. Go ahead and hit plugins and look for post search. It is a plugin that is part of the motion matching implementation in Unreal Engine, and you are going to see when we record gameplay with the Rewind Debugger activating the Auto-Eject and record buttons, and then we can do our thing, and when we are done and press pause, we are going to see how the new tracks pop up and we can debug any problems. If we now pause and choose our character, we are going to see the post search tracks pop up. With this, we can see the animation curves and why post search chose the animations that it chose. We are going to be able to debug a really complex animation system like the motion matching implementation in Unreal Engine. Doing things this way can be a little complicated, but it is important that you know that you can extend the Rewind Debugger with your own plugin and record whatever you need for your implementation to be able to debug things as you work with your own character and your own animation system. Okay, so since I want also non-advanced users to be able to log stuff using the Rewind Debugger, I have thought of another way, another trick to log things using the visual logger to see the results in the Rewind Debugger. So we can log locations, segments, or whatever the visual logger allows, and then we can visualize it in the Rewind Debugger. So let's get started, and let's now use the visual logger in Blueprint to implement debugging functionality for the sprint system in my character. So for that, we are going to use the vislogger blueprint nodes. We can log right now with the vislog location node the location of our character. We are now going to get the actor location, and with the actor location, we can then now paint a small sphere with the radius that we can see there, and with the text start sprint. With this, we will see in the Rewind Debugger this text, and now we can go to the log category and switch its name to running, for example. So we can identify our segment. Now we can go ahead and Control C, Control V this node, so we can get another one and connect the set and the get actor location to this new node, change the text to sprint stop, and now when the user presses the sprint button, we are going to get the sprint start log, and when it stops pressing it, we will get the sprint stop visual logging location. This will log individual points to the visual logger, and we want to log the full segment. So let's go ahead and implement this new functionality using the log segment node. With this, we are going to be able to see everything together and see the intermediate points when we are logging the sprint section. So let's go ahead and implement it. Let's look for event tick, and in the event tick, we are going to use a branch so we can log depending on the sprint value. So let's go ahead and create the variable so we can check if we are sprinting or not. Let's go ahead and hit create a new Boolean variable, and let's call it sprinting. And with that, we are going to be able to set it before our visual logger nodes. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get the variable for setting it. So let's set a sprint, and in the sprint start, we are going to activate it. And then when we stop sprinting, let's copy and paste the node. We are going to deactivate it, as we can see right here. And with that, we can now use it as a condition. And in the true branch, we can implement the visual logger segment, which is going to use the last location of the actor and the new location of the actor. Let's grab the visual logger segment with a new variable that we are going to create for storing that last location. Let's copy the actor location, and now let's go ahead and promote to variable the actor location so we can store the last one in set variable, and let's name it last location. Let's connect the actor location to the end of the segment and the last location to the beginning of the segment. With that, we can now go ahead and, after drawing the segment, update the variable, change category to segment, do not type any message, compile to see that everything is right. We are okay. And now we are almost ready to test our visual debugging nodes. We are going to change the color of the segment to red so we can distinguish better between the start and stop points and the segment. And now, after compiling, we are going to go ahead and hit play, and the Rewind Debugger is also going to store, as you are going to see, our custom logging using the visual logger. This is going to come really in handy because we are going to be able to see the beginning and end of the sprint that the user has performed. As you can see right here, we can see the running visual logger nodes and the segment nodes. So you can see perfectly where the user started and stopped sprinting, and we also can see the segment of gameplay where the sprint function has been activated. So this is really great. As you can see, it is not as advanced as using a plugin and custom curves, but still it is a great tool to have in your arsenal. We can go and see that first start sprinting point. You can see there your log message in the Rewind Debugger details panel. And if we go to the segment, you can also see if you had any message like printing, for example, the value of the segment. You could also see it right there in the Rewind Debugger details panel. But we can go a step further and open up the visual logger, and you are going to also be able to see the visual debug information of the visual logger. But we need to record again because we didn't open it up before, so we cannot select the visual logger tracks, so we can see in-game the visual debug information. So let's go ahead and scrap the timeline in the visual debugger, and you can see how the visual information is starting to pop up, and we can debug where we started sprinting visually apart from what information we have in the Rewind Debugger. So we can also see where we stopped sprinting, and if we would select the segments, we could also see them in the world, and with this debug any problem that we had with our system. So you can see that this is a really powerful tool that we can use in conjunction with the Rewind Debugger, and we can debug almost anything with this. So summing up, we have seen tons of tools that we can use to fix our animation problems, either if you have a complex character where these tools are going to be basic and you are going to need them to fix problems, but even if you have simpler characters, they are also going to come in handy because they are going to help you debug faster and they are going to help you find problems in an easier manner. So I think that these tools are great for anyone and everyone, and you cannot miss them. Well, so that's it for this video. As you can see, this is another easy to use tool that comes quite handy when you are having problems with the animation system in Unreal Engine. Thanks for watching, and we'll see each other in the next videos. Huge shout out and thanks to all my Patreons. As you know, making these videos takes a ton of time and effort because I research in depth all of the topics that I cover. So if you want me to keep making awesome stuff, consider supporting me on Patreon.